So you are a new author, or maybe you're just about to become a new author. You're finishing up that first book, that debut novel, and you're hearing all kinds of advice and suggestions and rules. How much of it is bullshit? Hi, my name is Matthew Wayne Selznick. I am a 20-plus year veteran of independent publishing, and I am a creative services provider helping authors bring their works to fruition, to market, and to an audience. And today coming to you from the outdoor studios of MWS Media in Southern California. Today I wanted to talk to you about some of these things that we hear uh, probably on social media, maybe right here on YouTube, that maybe conflict, that maybe cause you to be concerned, like, am I doing this author thing right? Am I missing out on something? There's a lot out there, and it's easy to be overwhelmed. And especially when you're first starting out, it's easy to let these things, well, they can almost be a form of procrastination fuel, right? So many different things to think about that comparison-itis and imposter syndrome can sneak in. And obviously, we can't talk about all of it, but let's hit maybe three things. So the first one, and this goes back to maybe Ray Bradbury, a personal favorite author of mine, so beloved by me that I think of him as my story father. He was instrumental, his work was instrumental in my becoming a writer myself. Ray Bradbury is one of these people who used to say, you have to write every day. That if you don't, you're maybe not even serious about this. And so that's the first thing that I want to call shenanigans on Ray. You were lovely, but you were also a human being with your own proclivities and quirks and faults. And what works for you, Ray Bradbury, might not work for everybody, might not even be possible for everybody. And that doesn't make everybody else less of a writer. I myself am not very prolific. I have over a dozen works on the market. Uh, should I have more? It would be lovely if I did. But my life, almost since I started actively publishing as an independent author in 2005, hasn't really been conducive to writing every day. Even if I could carve out the time, and often I could, it's a matter of carving out the energy. You may be in the same boat. If you are like me, over 50 years old, plenty of other responsibilities in your life, plenty of other pressures and obligations, it's not going to happen every day. And that's okay. That is not just okay, it's very important that you be okay with not showing up at the keyboard and creating manuscript words every single day of your life while there are possibly kids, possibly sick parents, possibly sick pets, bills to pay, things falling apart. Who knows? It's your life, right? It doesn't get any easier, and it doesn't really calm down. So don't punish yourself for not being able to show up and write every single day. Now, that said, you also don't want to put it off for weeks at a time, because something never done is never going to get done, right? And there is only so much time to be alive, memento mori and all that. We are older adults. We have less time ahead of us than we do behind us. So don't feel bad about not writing every day, but do try to figure out how you can work it in as often as possible. Because you have these books you want to write, you have these stories you want to tell. And as I think I've talked about in other videos, you owe it to the world to tell those stories. It's your responsibility and very possibly your legacy. So we're going to talk about the things that keep us from our writing and how to maybe overcome those in a later video. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. For now, I just want to say that it's okay if you don't write every single day. All right. So the next one, I'm going to kind of do these in a sort of an order that makes sense in terms of how the writing, progresses and goes, how your creative writing life progresses and goes. So the first one, don't worry about writing every day. Second one is the idea you have to write a certain number of words every day. Word count quotas are arbitrary. They are an artificial pressure. They are a source of competition and feeling as if you're less than other writers. Maybe you might hear these stories of writers who can do 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words a day, and they show up and write every day. That's them, and that's just a very few of them at that. Listen, you don't have to worry about how many words you've written when you do sit down to write. That's just an unnecessary pressure. If you're worried about how many words are showing up on the screen, if you're watching that little word counter, the bottom of your word processor, that's not you being immersed in the writing itself. That's not you focusing on the characters and the creativity and getting into flow. You can't be in a flow state if you're worried about matching some statistic or hitting some kind of, again, completely arbitrary goal. Daily word count quotas, especially if you try to follow someone else's daily word count quotas, are bullshit. Just no, just don't. Now, Matt, you might be thinking, isn't it important to kind of have goals and have milestones that you want to reach? And in order to do that, in order to figure out how long it's going to take you to reach those milestones, shouldn't one have some sort of goal for every session when you sit down to write? Well, sure. If that works for you, if that's how you are motivated, absolutely. I just don't recommend it be word count. If you're an outliner, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, let me put it this way. If you are someone who plans out your work in advance, if you kind of know where the story's going, where it's been, and what you're working on this time when you sit down to write, then maybe that's your yardstick. Not today I'm going to write 1,000 words. It's today I'm going to get through scene 15. I'm going to get through, this particular beat in the outline. Maybe that's it. Now that beat might be 500 words. It might be 2,500 words. It might be 250 words. The point is, and I think you can see this from what I just said, not every scene is going to be an equal number of words. Not not every bunch of words that you write is going to be equally easy or difficult, challenging or smooth sailing. Some scenes are harder to write than others. They're going to take longer. They might use more words. They might use less words. How do you gauge that? Don't worry about it. Set a goal for your writing session if you must, if that's how you work, if that's what motivates you. But word count is just, it's arbitrary. And if you compare yourself to others, well, first of all, you have no idea what their lives are like. Uh, and if they've been doing this for a while and they're very prolific and they're making their living solely off of being an author, well, they probably have different responsibilities, different pressures, and different everything from you. You can't compare yourself. And, that's probably the biggest thing of all. That's probably the overarching premise to this video is don't compare yourself to other writers when it comes to, frankly, anything, but especially in terms of what we're talking about today, in terms of how they do their work, how they measure their work, how they progress, where they're at, how long their ass is in the chair. They're not you. You're not them. And who you are and what your life circumstance is and how you approach your art is your business and entirely you. So don't beat yourself up for not writing every day. Please don't obsess over how many words you write per day. And the next thing, sort of in order, this probably should have come before word count per day. Some people are what they call pantsers, and some people are what they call plotters. Now, you've probably heard these phrases, but just in case you haven't, depending on how new you are to this writing life, a pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants, right? They are making it up as they go along, literally. They are learning the story as they write the story. Many people swear by this method, and it's the only way they can write. They say, if I plan things out ahead of time, I'm bored with the story. There are famous writers who are avowed pantsers, and it's one approach. Plotters are those who plan things out. They plot ahead of time. And really, even to call them plotters is restrictive because a story isn't just plot, right? So let's call them planners as opposed to pantsers. Maybe I said pantsers and planners when I started this section. I don't remember. I don't have a script. I don't even have a bullet point list. I'm just talking to you. So planners, right, they figure it out in advance. They have their character sheets all written out. They've done the research. They have a story structure that they follow, and they've written down either brief or copious notes as to what happens in every chapter, every scene, maybe every beat of every scene. And when they sit down to write actual manuscript, they can just look at what's up, what's next on the plan, and execute on that, right? Same deal. Many very famous, very productive, very popular writers are planners. Here's the thing. Planners, right? They front load a lot of their work. Pantsers have to go back after they've written the end and make everything work. They've got to figure out where the plot holes are. They've got to figure out where they kind of wrote themselves into a corner. They've got to fill in those gaps where they just wrote placeholder text like TK, 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 which if you type that, it just shows up real quickly and easily in the search when you look for it. They've got to kind of double check all their notes they might have made themselves as they've been going on. So they backload the work that happens after you type the end. Either way, planner or pantser, it probably amounts to the same amount of work. So really, no one way is better or worse than the other, as long as the end result is high quality and is the story that you want it to be, right? It's the best you can do. Doesn't matter how you got there. Now, myself, I am a bit of a hybrid. I tend to be a pantser when it comes to shorter works or vignettes. For longer works, even longer short stories, but especially novels, I'm definitely a planner. For my last major work, as I speak to you today on March 13th, 2026, my last novel, Light of the Outsider, I had uh, character documents and beat sheets, in other words, descriptions of each beat of the story, each sort of breakdown of how the story goes. Maybe we'll have a later video on beats and story structure if you'd like, at least my way of doing that. Again, let me know in the comments. That document was probably 17,000 words, but I knew so much about my characters who were all very complex. The book Light of the Outsider, there are, I think, 7 viewpoint characters, 7 protagonists, lesser and greater protagonists. Uh, and in taking the time to really think about who each one of these people were, not only was I able to slip into writing them that much easier, but I discovered things about those characters and about their world, this original fantasy setting called the Shaper's World, that I ended up with fodder for a bunch of other stories and maybe even novels, and novelettes, and novellas. Uh, so to me, that was time well spent. And also, yeah, because I had all, whatever it was, 30 some chapters broken down beat by beat by beat. Sometimes a chapter might be its own beat all on its own. Sometimes a chapter might be multiple beats. Because I had that all figured out in advance and I had worked out all the plot holes and weird little mistakes that can pop up and breaks in logic, when it came time to write, all I had to do was say, okay, today, oh, we're on, chapter 4, the third beat of chapter 4, or what have you. And I could just write it. I already knew who was in the scene, what the goal of the scene was, what was opposing that goal, what were the things that absolutely had to happen in that scene as as a consequence of previous scenes and in order to set up future scenes, both just in terms of events, but also the emotional uh, repercussions and consequences of that scene. I had it all figured out. So all I had to do was write it. And to address the people who say, oh, well, if I know all that stuff, the story, the writing is boring. To me, knowing all that stuff, doing that part of the creativity in advance, left me free to really do 2 things: get way deep and into the heads of the characters as I wrote them, kind of like an actor knowing their lines so well that they're not even thinking about it when it comes time to perform. But also I could focus on craft. I could focus on writing more beautiful words, hopefully. And the benefit to that is when I reached the end of that manuscript, well, then it was pretty clean. I didn't need to do a whole lot of cleaning up. I didn't need to do a full new draft. Just had to, fill in a few placeholders here and there and work out a few details that I kind of glossed over, that kind of thing. When I pants, when I'm writing a shorter story, it's more of, well, like the kids say, it's more of a vibe, right? I might have a scene or a particular feeling or a memory, and I want to kind of riff on that. And I might get, I don't know, a third or half or even three-quarters of the way into this and start to realize, okay, this is what the story is actually about. And then I kind of know where I'm going and I reach the end, and then I can go back loading the work instead of front loading it. I can go back and finesse that first quarter or half or three-quarters of what had been written before I figured out what I was doing and make it all work, right? Uh, Put in little foreshadowing bits and red herrings and whatever the story calls for, right? I will say, for me, and again, it might not be for you, and that's the whole point of this. Advice is not law. For me, it helps me to stay on track with larger projects if I have plotted and planned and done a lot of that work ahead of time. But that's not a rule. And if it doesn't work for you, if it just makes you anxious, if it ruins the act of creating for you, then don't bloody do it. All right? Speaking of the act of creating, and I think this will be our last one. We're coming up on 20 minutes, half an hour here. People will tell you that you shouldn't do any editing until you are completely done with the writing, that you don't edit until the first draft is done, that first draft is just, some people call it the garbage draft. It's just spewing out the story so that it's not in your head, it's on the screen or on the hard drive or on paper or what have you. Just get it out. And these people claim, not incorrectly for them, that the editing brain is different from the writing brain, that the editing brain is more critical and turns off the artistic impulse and might be more restrictive. And maybe for them, for many people, it is, but it might not be for you. I don't recall who the author was. It might have been Hemingway. I'll try to look it up and put it in the description for this video. Who would stop a writing session mid-sentence so that when they came back the next day or the next time they wrote, because you don't need to write every day, so that when they came back to the work, there was that sentence half unfinished. And for them, it worked. They could just sort of jump on that moving car and slip behind the steering wheel and keep driving. For me, when I sit down to start a writing session, assuming that I've already, done some work on this piece, I like to go back and do a read through of the previous session, whether it was the day before or a week before, or especially if it was a little while before, because I find that it puts me back in the voice of that particular work. And yes, as I go through, I'm going to make little tweaks and little adjustments. I'm not going to be like, oh, this word is spelled wrong, and it's not a full-blown edit, but I am refining, sort of course correcting, if you will. And for me, it puts me back in the mode of writing and working on that particular work. It flips that switch in my brain so that I am attuned to the voice of that particular piece. Because I don't know about you, but a fantasy work that I'm writing is going to read a little differently than a science fiction work or a literary work. It's all literary, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I kind of do some editing as I go, as a way of sort of repriming the pump before I get started again. And that's okay. On the other hand, you might indeed just spew out the entire thing, warts and all, and just plow through and not correct or refine or finesse anything that you've written until you're completely done. And that's okay. But neither one of these approaches is right or wrong. All that matters is that you're doing what works for you with the goal of finishing the work, of getting it out of your head and into some tangible form that can eventually be released and put out into the world so that your creations are there for others to experience. You don't need to write every day. But if writing every day is the only thing that makes you feel like you're being productive, if you feel really terrible just because of your own self, if you don't write every day, not because what other people do or don't, then write every day. That works for you. If you have the space in your life where that's even possible, more power to you. I'd love some of that space myself. But you don't need to write every day. It's okay if you do. You don't need to set a word count goal for every time that you write. It's okay if you do. If it makes you feel stressed out, if it makes you feel guilty when you don't hit those goals, then I wouldn't do it. It doesn't matter what Joe or Jane bestseller talks about on YouTube or on social media. They're not you, right? How you actually create your story, whether you are a planner or a pantser, doesn't matter. Be aware that if you're a planner, you're going to be doing more work ahead and potentially much less work after the fact. And if you are a pantser, you're going to, you've got a road ahead of you after you're done with that first draft. But either way works. Try both. Do the same, do both in the same work even. Like I mentioned with the shorter works for myself, I might start as a pantser, and once I've kind of got the rhythm and got the flow and start to understand what the story is about, kind of sort of turn into a planner. It doesn't matter. There is no wrong way. All right. Oh, and the editing thing. We already talked about that. The thing I really mostly want to convey to you in this semi-rambling, unscripted way that is mine is that what matters is that you create. What matters is that you tell your stories, that you serve the story, that you get it out, that you do it. Doesn't matter how, and it really doesn't matter what others are doing or say that you should do. What matters is finding what works for you. Everything else is bullshit. There are no rules. The only rule is serve the story. So, okay, there's one rule. But everything else, all other advice is just that. It's somebody else's opinion based on what works for them. And maybe what they've seen work for others who are, like-minded, right? You see the things that agree with you more than you see the things that disagree with you. Of course. Serve the story. Serve yourself. Honor yourself as a creator. Do not let yourself be discouraged by what others are doing or what they say you should do that maybe you can't. Maybe it's just not possible. Figure out what works for you. Now, if you want help figuring out what works for you, I have a one-on-one advisory mentorship program called Your Story Buddy. And there's going to be a QR code up there on the screen where you can find out more about it. Basically, these are 1-hour sessions, maybe a one-off to tackle a particularly vexing problem you're having with your work in progress, or stuff like this, like just trying to figure out how best to craft a writing life. A 1-hour session with me, either on the phone or on video chat through Zoom, where we suss it out. We talk just like I'm talking to you now, figure out what's going on, and I help you kind of work through it. There's always a way through. And what matters, again, is not what I think you should do. What matters is what works best for you, that I will help you figure out, whether it's, again, something specifically to do with your story or something to do more sort of existentially with how you approach and thrive in your creative writing life. The QR code is on the screen. There will be also a link in the description. And if you would like to schedule a Your Story Buddy session with me, so long as you book it before, let's say, April 15th, 2026, then I will give you a 40% discount on the regular rate for a single session.
So, hey, it's next day, Matt, coming to you because I was thinking about the video and I realized that I didn't include a coupon code for you to use when you took advantage of that 40% off on Your Story Buddy. So, the coupon code is AprilBuddy26. All one word, lowercase, AprilBuddy26. So once again, just use the barcode, QR code thingy there on the screen. Or you can, of course, just click the link in the description for 40% off your first single session with Your Story Buddy. All right, let's get back to the real video. And I think I'm gonna get myself some Mexican food. All right.
So that's a good deal. Use the QR code or click the link in the description to see what that rate would be. And let's work it out. Let's talk about it. All right. I hope that some of this stuff today has kind of put your mind at ease, has sort of released you from the anxiety and the pressure of seeing what other people are doing, people who maybe are more successful than you, who are further along than you. Look, what's great for them is great for them. Some of it might work for you, but the stuff that doesn't, absolutely you are under no obligation, and no one is going to judge you for not following what those other people are saying. Even me. All the usual stuff, okay? If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Make sure that you like this video and click to get notifications and all that good stuff. Leave a comment about what you've seen here today and what you think about it all right down there below. And, if you're in need of some one-on-one assistance, Your Story Buddy, that's me, is ready to help you. The link is in the description. The QR code is on the screen. My name is Matthew Wayne Selznick. Take care.